Hi, I'm Adventure. I wanted to try something a little bit different for this video. I've done a lot of speed drawings in the past, and so have hundreds of other artists. And hundreds of other artists have also done a bunch of tutorials, which I've also done a handful of. None of those seem to really take off a whole lot. So I thought I would do a combination of kind of a tutorial, discussing how I went about making this piece while also demonstrating the drawing of this piece. And with the newest episode of Game of Thrones being a massive deal, and Daenerys being my favorite character, at least aesthetically, even though it's hard to pick a favorite character, decided I would draw her. Originally I was going to render her more in my own art style, but through the process of drawing her, she ended up coming out a lot more realistic than I originally anticipated. So, in beginning the piece, I like to lay it out in basic shapes and the roughest lines possible. That way I don't get as attached to him, and I'm more willing to make changes to the art as I go. I also, instead of erasing out all of the sketchy lines and spending a lot of time on that process, I just do layer after layer and clean up the lines as I go. Since this piece wasn't going to have any line art in the end, I knew that I didn't have to refine the lines too hard or think too hard about making them extremely smooth. I was extremely unsure about how I felt about the bottom of her dress, what to do with her feet, and so I'll end up grappling with that a lot through this process. In laying down base colors, I'm never fully attached to any color that I lay down. I end up messing with the hue and saturation a lot in Photoshop in order to dial that into a place that I like. It wasn't until this point that I decided to add dragons to the piece at all. And originally because I kept being locked into the current reality in Game of Thrones where her dragons are massive, and I didn't want to try to fit them into a composition or have them steal the show from the character herself. It took a surprisingly long time for it to occur to me that I can actually just do the baby dragons and fit all three of them in, plus they're a little more vibrant and endearing as babies anyway. When I'm laying down the colors, I go with simple block colors on a hard brush in Photoshop and just lay everything down as quickly as I can, and then I start blending it with some skin brushes, which I've included in the link in the description in the video. The blending, when it comes to blending eyes, I like to think about the way an iris looks really zoomed in, and so if you look at a macro photo of an eye, then you'll get an idea of how they have this depth where the iris kind of punches into the eye. And when it comes to photo reference, I like to gather kind of a memory bank of different photos and different images of components of a face that I can hopefully call on later as I draw until it becomes muscle memory or more habit. So once I'm done laying down all of the block colors in a piece, I just start using the smudge tool. Probably for the majority of the painting itself is actually done just with the smudge. And so right now I'm pulling and blending and warping shadows, and I'm experimenting with how I want to get a scaly texture on the dress. I was unsure about how to approach that, if I wanted to use brushes or not, which in the end I decided to use a combination of both. At this point I'm figuring out how I can use the smudge tool to create a scaly texture. And I'll also include the link for the scale brushes that I ended up using later on in the description. I also use the dodge and burn tool really heavily. I didn't discover that until pretty recently, but those tools are incredible for pulling out different colors. With you can change the settings to highlight, mid-tone, shadows on either tool, and they'll do different things to different colors and different hues. So I also like to use the lasso select tool, and I use my blending modes, which you can kind of see in the side of the video, to create multiply gradients, and I play with the blending modes and multiply, overlay, shadow, so on, and you never know what any blending mode's going to look like until you actually apply it to the piece or that specific area. Sometimes difference and subtract are actually surprisingly good on a piece. Most of the time they do some really weird stuff. And so I always wonder why I even take the line art to the level that I do, considering that when I get into really painting it, I end up using the paintbrush and color to start changing forms and shapes a lot more, or altering them really dramatically from the initial line art. For the photo reference for these, I had them pulled up on my other monitor. I found some little toy versions of the dragons which had a little more of a caricature feel to them, and they seem to accentuate certain features of the baby dragons that are harder to catch when they're in motion in the show or even in screenshots from the show. I definitely took my own spin on the dragons. It was already hard enough drawing them in the first place, so I wasn't prepared to try to get them exactly right. That's just one of many cop-outs that I go through the course of creating a piece. This is the point when I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do with the foot, so I just drew a foot, and then added flip-flops, which was pretty ridiculous, and I figured once I started adding some more swirly lines, shiny elements, made them a little more medieval, then I could get away with that, and that would be fine, and I could justify that decision as a more wild or primitive side of Daenerys that was around earlier in the show, so maybe I'm like mixing worlds, but the reality is that I just actually really like to draw feet. Alright, thanks for watching the video. If you have any suggestions for tutorials or anything else you would like me to dive a little deeper into, any techniques that I showed here or any other techniques you would like to know about that I might know about, ask me to make that video in the comments, and I'll do my best to reply. If you have any questions, same thing, I'll do my best to reply. If you have any interesting commissions, or you'd like to reach out to me any other way, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, or you can email me. All of those links are here. And thanks, yeah, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.